Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back with another how-to. Today we're going to be replacing the alternator on this 2008 Honda Accord 2.4 4-cylinder. Now this should fall in line with any 8th gen Accord, which is 2008 to 2012. So let's get into it now. All right, guys, so we're in the car. Now the issue with this was driving on the highway, completely died, came to a stop, completely dead after, no start. And as you can see, if we take the key here, completely dead. So this thing was towed to the house here. I'm actually at this customer's house to replace the alternator. I've already diagnosed it, but died on the highway. That's where we're at, and I'll show you how we confirmed what it is. We'll go ahead and hop out of the car. Tested the battery here with the voltmeter, and look at the volts, 0.84. That is horrific. A good battery should be 12.5 or more. So what happened was this actually started running off the battery. Once the alternator failed, it was running off battery power alone, and then it completely died out because the battery is not enough to power the car. It needs the alternator, so that's why it's there. Killed the battery. So bad battery, bad alternator. So let's go ahead and get this done. All right, guys, so before you do anything and start taking electrical components off involving the alternator or anything like that, you definitely want to remove the negative battery terminal. So it is a 10 mil. Go ahead and take that off and back that right off. Free. Now if your battery's still good or salvageable, you can go ahead and charge it and leave it in. As I mentioned, I'm replacing this battery. It's only at 0.75 volts, so we're going to get it out of here. So I'm going to remove the battery in its entirety, but if yours is good or salvageable, obviously you can take the negative terminal off and move on. So I'm going to go ahead and get this battery out, and then we'll work on the alternator. All right, guys, I got the battery out. As you see, the bracket is right there to the side. I have the nut and the appropriate side rod. These rods are two different sizes, so if you do take it off, it's easy. 10 mil, fire it off. Just keep it in order so you know what's what. There we go. Battery gone. So let's get into this alternator replacement. So what we need to do first is release the belt tension. So we need to get to the belt tensioner, which is down here. And if you see that pulley right there, you can kind of see that pulley right there, that pulley down there. That bolt is a 14 millimeter. What we're going to do is get a breaker bar with a small 14 millimeter. We're going to pull the tensioner forward to release the tensioner on the belt, and then we can get the belt off of the alternator, and then we'll have access to start getting that alternator off. All right, guys, I showed you the 14 mil on the tensioner pulley, so I'm going to go ahead and get in there with a breaker bar and a 14. I would suggest moving this reservoir out the way. Should slide up. Something to note for me, this is another thing I'm addressing on this car, it is broken. So I don't know what happened there, but we got a broken reservoir. Make sure you get that out of the way. You don't want to hit that reservoir. It is definitely right where you would put the breaker bar, a ratchet, whatever, a serpentine belt tool. It is right in your way. So I just have it pulled up out of the way. You're going to want to go in through here. All right, and I went in between the AC line here and the belt. So as you can see, right down there is the pulley. I'm right on the 14 mil. So I got just enough space with this small breaker bar and the 14 mil right up against that line, because like I said, this just fell back into place. But be careful, because you don't want to break that. So if you pull it towards the front of the car, towards you can see that belt tension loosen up. So I'm going to pull that forward, and we're just going to pull that right off of the alternator itself. That way we can keep the belt routing where it is, and really all we should have to do when we're all done is just put the belt back around the alternator. So let's go ahead and get that off of the alternator, and then we can go from there. All right, guys, I'm pulling it forward. I'm just going down by the alternator. I pulled it right off. All right, so if you can see, belt is off of the pulley down here, and now we have access to go ahead and get this alternator off. All right, guys, like I mentioned, I did move this out of the way, the reservoir, took it off of the bracket. One thing I would also suggest is moving this coolant reservoir. So take this cap off with the hose. You can just shake off any residual fluid. I'm just going to put that over here for now, out of our way, and you can slide this up and out. Just make sure you don't spill it everywhere, but you can give yourself more room by just sliding out the coolant reservoir. All right, so now we got a little bit more space to get in here and have access to our alternator. All right, so now that we have some room with the coolant reservoir gone, I'm going to remove this harness. Take your thumb, press in the tab. You should be able to pull it straight up. Okay, so you can see, got that harness. Pull it out. Now we do have the nut holding on the terminal. So the positive terminal is held in with a nut. We're going to get that once we pull the alternator off and have better access to it. So right now we're just going to unplug the harness, and really all we have to do now is get these 2 bolts out and we should be home free. All right guys, so there's 2 bolts retaining this alternator onto this bracket. So the first one is right there. That is a 12 mil. Okay, and the other one is down below the pulley. If you can see, I have an extendable 3/8 drive socket wrench with a 3/8 drive deep 14 mil on that bolt. It's virtually impossible to get a clean shot with a GoPro or anything of that bolt, but that is where it is directly underneath, and I have the deep 14 on a 3/8 drive extendable, and I'm right on that bolt. So I'm going to start with that 14 mil at the bottom. We're going to work that out, then we'll come up to the 12 mil and get the upper 12 out. So 14 mil, let's go ahead and get that thing out. All right guys, I got it broken loose, so I'm just going to work this bolt out. I think now that I got it started, I probably can just go ahead and take the socket wrench off and just take the 14 mil deep and just work it off on my hand. So I'm going to do that now. All right guys, so you probably can't see the bolt or the socket itself, but it's coming out by hand. So I'm just taking this deep and working that 14 mil right out of the bottom. Now finger strength is about all that's needed now to get the remainder of this bolt out. I think I just about have it. Just about have it in my hand. Yep, I got it. So here it is. 14 mil, that is the lower bolt. Goes in here. Okay, so let's give you a reference as to how it's designed and where you're wrenching at. Just below the pulley. So there is the 14. Let's go ahead and get this upper 12 mil. All right guys, there is the 12. Using my extendable ratchet again. And that PS line's a little bit in the way, so I'm gonna come inside of it. But like I said, you can move that around and give yourself some leverage. So as you can see, I'm on the 12. You can hear it. There it goes. All right, so it's freeing up. I'm gonna go ahead and back that 12 all the way out, and then we'll go ahead and free up this alternator. Right after just a little bit of backing out with the socket wrench, should be free to the touch. So I'm going to back this out with my hand here. There it is. That is our upper one. So here is our upper top bolt. Okay, and there is the bottom. They are 2 different sizes. Make sure you note that the 14 longer is the bottom and the shorter 12 is the top. So I got those to the side. Now our alternator moves. As you can see, she's just about free. I am going to pry it out, but first I'm going to get a little 10 mil and we're going to back out our positive cable wire to the alternator out, get that freed up, get the cable out of the way, and then we'll pull the alternator out. All right guys, so like I mentioned, we have the alternator pulled forward, and I just have a deep 10 on our extendable, and I'm just going to back that 10 nut right off of that positive wire. All right, got it broken loose, so now I can just work this off with my hand. I have the 10 mil deep, just backing this nut right off. As you can see, it's just about off. Should be able to get the remainder with my hand. Yep, 10 is off. And now we should be able to pull this cable right off. Yep, there it is. All right, so there's the harness that plugs in, and there is the 10 positive terminal. We'll put those over here to the side, and now we'll go ahead and get this alternator out. All right, so everything is disconnected. I just have a reasonable size pry bar here, and I'm just gonna give it a little push right here off of the bracket. Should give it just enough strength to work it out. Now you want to be careful, because right where this is touching, and I think that's actually what's blocking me, is the AC line. Yep, it is the AC line. So what I'm gonna do is put you guys down, okay? And I'm gonna attempt to pull this up and out. So I'm just rocking it a little bit. All right, there you go. I just had to rock it, and I'm gonna guide it right out. And there it is, guys. Alternator is free. All right, so here is our new alternator. And if we compare it to the old, looks really good. Has our brown harness plug. Look identical, everything's the same. So this alternator was picked up by the customer. It's from AutoZone. It's a Duralast remanufactured, part number 11390. And consider how parts are recently. Sometimes it's just better to spend a little bit of extra money, get it from your local parts store, because if this fails, like a lot of new parts are coming defective right out of the box, you can just go right to AutoZone, swap it out for free, and you don't have to play the waiting and shipping game if you order it online or deal with somebody over the phone or email. So my opinion, starters, alternators, things like that, just buy them from a parts store. Even though it's more pricey, honestly sometimes it ends up being less of a headache. So that is our part number. There is our new alternator. Let's go ahead and get this thing installed. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get this new alternator installed. Now I just want to note that I did remove the power steering reservoir. Like I mentioned, it was damaged, broken, and cracked. So I am going to be replacing that for the customer. I am waiting on the part. So because I don't have it, I just took it off and I have it prepped and ready. So whenever that comes in, I can throw it on. But just wanted to note that. All right, guys, so I have the new alternator in hand. We're gonna go ahead and drop this thing in and get it installed. So what I am going to do is start by dropping this thing in here, and we're going to connect our, if I hitting the camera, I'm sorry, it's kind of in my way, but I do want to get a good angle so you can see this. So I'm just finagling it on down. I have the positive wire here. I'm going to move that rubber grommet out, push that in over the terminal, and I'm going to start our 10 mil nut with this. All right, you got to fight the boot a little bit, but all right, so I got that 10 started. I'm going to tighten it down in with a deep 10 mil socket. So I'm just finger tightening it in. All right, I got that pretty much locked in by hand, but I'm going to take my socket wrench with this deep 10 now and make sure it's nice and tight and locked in. So let me just maneuver my way on in here. All right, that feels pretty good. It's a very awkward angle, but let's feel it. Feels nice and tight. So once you got that all reattached with the 10 mil and you got your terminal back on, you can go ahead and put your rubber grommet back over. And I'm just going to go ahead and plug in our harness here, our electrical connector to the plug on the alternator. So got that plugged back, so our connections are good. Now what we got to do is finagle this thing back into its place, which is not going to be fun, but let's go ahead and get it done. All right, so you want to drop this onto the bottom part of the mount, really give you the best chance at getting it where it needs to go. And once you got that pretty much in the proximity of where the bolt hole lines up, it's probably not going to be perfect, but you can get it close. We're going to push this forward and lock in our 12 mil. All right, guys, after a lot of rocking back and forth, you really got to work it onto the mount. So if we're looking at the bottom of the alternator, it has these two things. The mount goes in between it, so you got to rock it back and forth until it sits onto the mount. So you're trying to get in between here, the mount, to sit as almost perfect as possible where the bolt hole is just about aligned. Now I'm going to go for the top bolt first. It's going to be easier to get us in the right spot for that bottom bolt. So I think I'm right about there. I just popped it in. It is not grabbing, so let me pull it up a hair. I'm going to have to play with it a bit so you can find the hole. Not the funnest thing in the world, but
doable. All right, guys, if you can see, I've played with it enough that I have the leverage so that I can just finger tight that bolt in as it should be. So you can see I got it almost finger tight, not quite, just about. Okay, and now what we're going to do is do the hard part here, which is try to find that bottom bolt hole. So let's grab that and try to work it in. All right, so try to get you guys a decent angle. There's really no way you're going to see this thing go in or tighten, but just to give you an idea of how I'm doing it and working it in. So I got the bolt in the hole of the alternator, although we are definitely not aligned yet, so trying to feel around, see where we're at here in reference to the bracket. Just gonna have to move it a bit so you get that thing to line. And it's not gonna be fun. I'm nowhere near it. So I want to mess around with this a hair, see if I can feel it out. All right, guys, after some fighting, I did have to back this up a little bit. I finagled this and just rocked it while I was pushing in the bottom 14 mil, and I got it started. So like I said, it's going to be hard to see where I got it started, but just have this in with a little bit of play, and you might have to move and finagle and rock this while you're forcing the 14 in, but I did get it to, you know, pop through the hole and then start. So I'm going to go ahead, get both of these finger tight, and then we're going to lock both of them in. All right, guys, I got these as tight as I can with my finger. So I got my 14 on the bottom. Just gonna work that in until it's tight, and then we'll come right up to the 12. All right, so I got the bottom one locked in nice and tight. I'm on this upper one now. So I'm on the upper 12 mil. 14 is locked in, and we're just getting it till it's pretty nice and tight. So I'm coming about to that end here. Yep, there we go. So you don't need to overwork it, just get it nice and tight, and she is nice and stable. So we got both of our 2 bolts retaining this into the bracket back in. Everything's plugged up. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and get this belt back on. All right, guys, so I hope for your sake that the belt stayed about where it was when we took it off. Mine completely came unrouted, came off the cranks. All right, so if the belt came off like it did with me, here is the belt routing. All right, so I have the 14 mil back on the idler pulley for the tensioner with the breaker bar. I have this weight where I can pull it off the power steering pump and right back over the alternator. So I'll set the camera down, and we're going to get that right back over our new alternator. All right, guys, pull it forward towards the front of the car. This is going to be tight. Just make sure it stays over the pulley behind it. It's going to want to slide off. So what I'm doing now is getting it back over that one. Yep, there it is. Alright, just gotta get this back over the power steering pump. There it is, guys. Belt back on and routed and right over our new alternator. All right, guys, so now that the belt is back on, we're going to slide our coolant reservoir back into place. You'll feel it lock in as it just did. Put your cap back on, make sure it's nice and tight. There we go. Got that tight, make sure everything's good there. And then if you have the reservoir, unlike me, and you moved it and you popped it off of the bracket here, you can go ahead and position it, slide it back in, and we're virtually done. The only thing now is the battery. So if you had a good battery or recharge it, whatever the case may be, you can go ahead and put your negative terminal back on. If you got to replace your battery, you can go ahead and put in your new one, and then from there this thing is ready to fire up and test. All right, guys, so I got a new power steering pump reservoir. So got that all connected up, installed, proper fluid, as that has nothing to do with this job really, but as I mentioned, you know, ours did break, so I didn't want to start the car without it. But here's our new alternator. Got a new battery. So initially they
gave the customer 51 series. This car had a 26R in it. The 51 series is a little bit smaller, and this does have the tray for a 26 size or 35 size battery. So got a 26R, and the battery was dead. They're not a common battery. Just sat on the shelf, was completely dead, and even with a charge and me trying to jump it, still didn't work. So got a 35 series. It's pretty tight with this battery tie down here, and this thing definitely needs a new positive terminal. I don't know who put this crap on here, but we're going to try it out. So new battery, new alternator. Let's go ahead and get this thing fired up. Yeah, buddy, she is running. Make sure your belt's not getting caught. Everything looks good. All your work looks good. We are going to put the voltmeter on the terminals. I'll show you what we should be running at real quick. All right, and you do want to verify that the car is charging. So a good battery should be 12.5 at the minimum. 12.4 maybe. 12.4, 12.5 if the battery is good prior to starting. So with the car off, it should be at 12.5. With the car running, it should be between 13.7 and 14.7. As you can see, we are holding a steady 1441. That is great. That's exactly what we want. This is getting charged, and the alternator is holding a charge, and our charging system is back. The car is running perfectly fine. So this fixed the issue. No more dead battery, no more bad alternator. So I hope this helped with doing the alternator on your HN 2.4 Accord. Make sure you stay tuned, because you never know when I might be wrenching on this thing again. And until next time, guys.